Are you ready to pack your bags and head out on a grand adventure? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to Big Blend's Road Trip Radio Show. Let's find out where we're going today. Welcome, everyone. We are super excited to welcome back Jim Hinckley onto Big Blend Radio, especially our Road Trip Radio podcast. I know this is going on some of our other shows, but Jim was on our show a few years ago, a few times, talking about his beloved Route 66. And I say his beloved, it's a beloved route for many of us, but he is known as one of the authorities on Route 66. Its history, its travel, its culture, its pop culture. He's a historian. He's an award-winning author. He's also a podcaster, and I encourage you to go to his website, jimhinckleysamerica.com. He's based out of Kingman, Arizona, and his latest book is out November 4th, and this goes through Quarto. Quarto Books is awesome, so check them out at quarto.com. The book is called Route 66, 100 Years, a Route 66 Centennial Anthology. As we all know, 26 is Route 66 Centennial. So, Jim, it is good to have you back on the show. It really has been a little bit of time, you know? We need to stop that.
We do. Yeah. We need to visit more often.
Yeah, because one thing I love about you is that you never stop. You always have this, you're an explorer who understands all the little bits of history make up the big history, and you never stop. And it's the rabbit hole thing, is, we're of the same cut of rabbit cloth, but leave the bunnies alone. But you never stop. I mean, Route 66 covers so much ground, so you never get bored with it because it never ends, like with the stories, ever.
And new chapters are being written all the time. I had the opportunity in 2018 to speak at the Second European Festival in Zlin, Czechia. And that became a whole new chapter for me and for Route 66. And it's ongoing.
Always look at Route 66 like Americans had it going a long time ago. And then Europeans really got into Route 66 and the culture. And at that time, Americans just I don't know what happened to the road trip culture, it kind of faded a little bit. And now I feel like we have a resurgence from all over the place, this country and around the world, that is interested in road tripping as a whole. And I think Route 66 really made road tripping the cool thing to do, but it didn't start that way, right? As you talk about in the book.
No, it's a long, long history, but Route 66, one of the most amazing things is, first of all, it's a highway that doesn't officially exist anymore. It hasn't since 1985, and yet it has an international fan club. But Route 66 is not our most historic or scenic highway, but from its inception, it's always had the best press and publicity. And it's gotten woven into our culture. And so it's come to represent the quintessential American experience and the quintessential American road trip. And it's an amazing blending. And then you throw into the fact that a lot of the road was laid on top of old roads, like in New Mexico. The pre-37 alignment of Route 66 is literally on top of the Santa Fe Trail. So you start having all these layers of history. Yeah.
That was something, going to Santa Fe and going at the plaza where the La Fonda, and you have the La Fonda in there, and we got to stay there and cover the plaza. And I'm going, wait, Route 66 and the Santa Fe Trail and the La Fonda, isn't that like what historically the first inn in America, like our very first, like true inn? And, they say that it's like, there's this legend behind it. Let's put it that way, that they were the first inn in this country. So it's kind of interesting on that level.
There's been an inn on that corner in Santa Fe since like 1612.
Yeah.
And, a series, different ones, but there's
for the Southwest, that's pretty old.
Yeah.
Going back east, when we went back east, now we're traveling full time. It was like, wait, we're staying in a bed and breakfast from the 1700s. Where do you get that in the Southwest? But it kind of aligns. Look at Route 66, the popularity that it became with pop culture travel. I look at it as this corridor that changed tourism and changed the communities through tourism and changed travel. And obviously the automobile too. So it's part of automobile history, but this tourism culture, obviously pop culture as we talk about, but it really changed how we explore as Americans. And I think got us out of our comfort zones a bit.
Yeah, I mentioned the press and publicity that Route 66 has had. You can go back. The highway was certified as a U.S. highway in November of 26. And in early 27, Cyrus Avery and a group of visionaries established the U.S. Highway 66 Association. And the goal was to have Route 66 paved from end to end and to promote it as the main street of America.
Mm.
And by the way, that's a little term that was borrowed, plagiarized from the old National Old Trails Road Commission, but that's another story. But they started immediately promoting this. And one of the first real opportunities was the Transcontinental Foot Race of 1928, the so-called Bunyan Derby, an epic foot race from Los Angeles to Chicago and then on to New York. And that became an international media sensation because the $20,000 prize attracted ultra marathon runners, Olympians, and a 19-year-old Cherokee Indian boy from Foyle, Oklahoma on Route 66. And he started leading the pack by the time they got to the Texas Panhandle. It was a David and Goliath story set on Route 66. Then in 1932, the U.S. Highway 66 Association partnered with the Olympic Committee and started promoting Route 66 as the scenic highway to the Olympics in Los Angeles. And then you had the Grapes of Wrath, the theme song, Get Your Kicks on Route 66, the popular TV show I Love Lucy in the early 1950s. They did a 4-part series about their trip from New York to California that centered on Route 66. Then the TV show, and then Easy Rider, and it's just been woven into things. It became the main street of America.
Well, what about like looking at the big landmarks that I think that's one of the more popular things and from there also, I mean, people do that even on different highways and the old advertising things, which I know you've been on the show talking about before, but who said, hey, let's, have a giant blue whale or let's put, there's let's put Big Al or, all of these giants. And just who started that? Let's be crazy roadside attractions.
Well, I think that's endemic to American culture. We've always had this quirkiness and everything's bigger in America kind of thing. You can go back to Lucy, the big elephant on the shore of New Jersey. That's in the 1880s. But with Roadside, you had this incredible tsunami of opportunity for business on Route 66 and all the U.S. highways, but US 66 specifically. How do you differentiate your gas station, your trading post, your motel from the 300 other ones that are down the street? Well, you come up with something quirky, something odd, something different. And so as a result, you end up with these strange things that are just woven into the tapestry of the Route 66 story. United Fiberglass in the 1960s, they started creating what became known as the Muffler Men. These were advertisements for Uniroyal Tire. They did one that was a gallon of bikini for Uniroyal Tire. We had all these different quirky roadside attractions that became just woven into the road trip experience.
Hmm. A couple years ago, we went, I remember when Route 66 in Arizona started to go, hey, hello, here we are, Seligman, I think it was. And I've
Yes.
told people that Route 66 Arizona was like hot business. This is where it all kind of had this resurgence because it fell away over the years, right? And I love, by the way, in the book too, that you have all these historic fun facts and history of, all these different places. And you've got other authors that have joined you in this, other experts, which have also been on our show. But all of that history of the rise and fall of Route 66 because it affected commerce. Because it became commercial, but a fun way, the way they did advertising was this fun way, whereas people now are like, turn the ads down off the TV, go to the refrigerator. But Route 66 is like billboards, giants, crazy things, that you're going to see. But then it went away. But I remember Arizona's Ligman and Hackberry, it's Hackenberry, right? That we went
Yeah.
through. It's been a while. And them coming back with this and how they had to really get together to get Route 66 back as a map. And I'm thinking this was back to maybe 2005 or 6. I don't know. You're going to know all that stuff better because you got Oatman and the donkeys and the burros and everything, right? We got to talk about them. But just a couple years ago, we had a little time and we went and we stayed in Williams. Has like redone itself to me. I'm just going back from, ancient times and has really redone itself in Route 60. It's really embraced Route 66. But then we were driving from there and through to Seligman, and here comes the Burma shave signs. And we both got the giggles. I'm like, I don't remember that there. So people have really started to adopt these signs and it's fun. And this is when advertising was fun, Now you have to wait for the Super Bowl for it to be fun.
Well, we had things like Dinah Shore singing, "Get to see the USA in your Chevrolet," and, we had all these
Oh,
things in
yeah.
the 50s. But, it's always been there. There's always been advertisement to fit the era. But the advertising campaigns, and you'll find this all over the United States, but because Route 66 has become such a microcosm of the American experience, you mentioned these, advertisements. Jackrabbit Trading Post, which is still with us, been in the
Yeah.
same family since the 1960s, has been around since the 40s, and was enshrined in the movie Cars. One of the original founders of that, and a fellow named Wayne Troutner in Winslow, Arizona, they hatched up this incredible advertising campaign. Wayne Troutner had a Western wear store, and he and the owner of the Jackrabbit Trading Post went as far east as St. Louis, putting up signs along the highway. The Jackrabbit Trading Post had no writing, just a black silhouette of a rabbit.
Mm-hmm.
Wayne Troutner's sign was a very curvaceous woman with a bare midriff, big bosom, and a cowboy hat, and it says, "For men only." And that's all it said. When you got to the Jackrabbit Trading Post, about 5 miles from the trading post, there was another jackrabbit, and it said, "5 miles, here it is." Now, who's not going to stop? You've been seeing this rabbit all the way across the country, and you're curious. For Wayne Troutner, there must have been a little disappointment when people found out that For Men Only was a Western wear store. But that's another story for another day.
That's funny, that's the funny part. Tell us a little bit about the history of how everyone it's actually part of our National Park Service, right? And I know people are concerned about the continuance, but I feel like the communities along the highway, that's what makes it, but we do need funding. Okay, I'm just saying. I'm just always going to say we want funding for it.
That's gotten changed too. But the road is always what makes Route 66 unique is the people. You can find this mom and pop stuff, this Americana, almost in any small town in America. But Route 66, Michael Wallace described it as a linear community. And I'll take it a step further. Route 66 is America's longest small town. It's a living time capsule with an overlay of Disneyland. And it's the people. It's the people you meet on the road. The people you meet traveling the road. People who are quitting jobs, good jobs, to buy a condemned motel in some backwater town and pouring themselves into it and having the time of their life. And they have an infectious enthusiasm for all of it. And that's what the magic of Route 66 is. It's the people.
Yeah, and people, and like Albuquerque, from what I've heard, is Albuquerque is getting back their neon signs and really working on the motel side of things, going, really embracing it to be ready for everything that's happening for the Centennial.
Tulsa has become the poster child. They are selling everything on the hog and the squeal. They got this thing figured out, and they've got neon sign initiatives, facade improvement programs. They have transformed the Route 66 corridor in Tulsa. It's just astounding what's happening there. And the diversity, they're not just embracing the past. You go to places like Mother Road Market in Tulsa, a repurposed historic building. It's the most incredible food court you've ever seen in your life in an historic building. And it is the American diversity made manifest in there. You can get authentic Nigerian food, Korean food, sushi. You can get some of the best hamburgers, French fries, and onion rings all in one place. It's just amazing.
See, now they have that in Albuquerque too. They have this food court. I think it was a sawmill. I can't remember the food court name, but it's across from the Hotel Chaco. And we went in there. We're having Peruvian food mixed with local New Mexico beers, and down the road is a vineyard. And New Mexico has some of the oldest wine in the country. So there's all these experiences. How do you do a book for the Centennial? How do you do that? You know, Nancy and I are working on all this Jefferson Highway stuff going, holy cow, there's just too much. It's a never ending story. How do you do a book like this?
This book, this one, Route 66, 100 Years, this was a dream project of mine, and we got some editorial leeway on this. Unlike a lot of Route 66 books, we start in the beginning, back in the 1830s, with Senator Henry Clay's American Plan, the plan to start building a national network infrastructure. And that gave birth to the Erie Canal, the National Road, these kind of things. Of course, that was supplanted by the railroad. And so a national highway system kind of fell by the wayside with the development of the railroad. But we were still focusing on roads. In the mid-1850s, late 1850s, Lieutenant Edward Fitzgerald Beale was tasked with surveying a road to California, originally from Fort Defiance, New Mexico, to the Colorado River, and eventually from Fort Smith, Arkansas. That was the Beale Wagon Road. That became the first federally funded road in the Southwest. And then the railroad followed that, the National Trails Road and Route 66. But all of that was laid on a Native American trade route that was over 1,000 years old. But the evolution in this book, we got to chronicle it all. This early period when the railroad kind of overshadowed development of a road system until about the late 1880s and mid 1890s. The bicycle. We had an absolute tsunami of interest in bicycles. There were bicycle clubs forming in Laramie, Wyoming, Prescott, Arizona in 1890, 1891, 92, organizing the most insane road trips you've ever imagined. Bicycle trips from Laramie, Wyoming to the World's Fair in Chicago in 1893. This kind of thing.
Wow.
No roads. So we started the League of American Wheelmen. They started working with the farmers, the Grange movement, encouraging for economic development and growth for tourism. We needed better roads. And that gave rise to the Good Roads Association. But involved with the bicycle mania, we can also find the cornerstone for the auto industry. Louis Chevrolet was deeply involved with bicycle racing, bicycle manufacturing, all these early pioneers. The automobile, surprisingly, came into being largely because of the manure crisis. In a great irony of history, cities were literally being swallowed by pollution. New York in 1895, they actually had a report about the manure crisis. There was 1.5 million tons of manure being taken off the streets every month. Plus, you had urine, and people, when a horse got sick or died, they'd leave it on the street, and it might be a week before the city picked it up. We had a crisis. So people like Ransom E. Olds and some of these other fellows started pushing that the solution for the pollution was the automobile.
And now it's the other way around.
Interestingly enough, another part of the story that's interesting is the first real push for automobiles, urban areas, was electrics. And the first person ever struck and killed in the United States, my pa said it was better to fill the head with useless knowledge than no knowledge at all. If this turns up on Jeopardy, please don't forget me and you win some money. But the first person struck and killed by an automobile in the United States was a man named Bliss. And he was struck and killed by an electric taxi cab in 1898.
Boy.
But we got into this. The Good Roads Association started really pushing for this network of roads. We had the Automobile Club of Southern California got involved, 1899. AAA was formed in 1903. The automobile manufacturers jumped on board. Then you had these roads associations, Jefferson Highway Association, National Old Trails Road Association, Ocean to Ocean Highway, Trail to Sunset, all of these roads.
The Pikes Peak, and wasn't that one of the earlier ones too?
There was hundreds and hundreds, and there was no universal signage. The roads were often highways in name only. In 1915, Edsel Ford, Henry Ford's son, made a trip along the National Old Trails Road, which became Route 66 in the Southwest. And he noted in his journal for July 15th, 1915, they left Williams, Arizona that morning and arrived in Kingman, Arizona at midnight, 153 miles. And they considered it a good day's run because he'd only had 3 flat tires and 1 broken spring on his car.
My gosh.
So it was brutal. We had to have something different, and it became the U.S. highway system.
Wow, it's amazing because even when you think about when cars were first built, there were decades before they would actually go even 50 miles out of your town, right? So that was part of it. I read about Ford and Firestone and Edison, and then there was a naturalist taking road trips, and Firestone was going, "Oh, we need a fire shop." Not a Firestone. We need tires. We need tire shops. And Ford's like, yeah, we do. We need tune-ups. And then they were like, we need gas stations. We need that kind of thing back in the day is pretty epic. And where they were, I think one of their first road trips was to the Everglades, you know.
They became the vagabonds. They became really famous. They had little motor homes, and they would travel northern Michigan, different places. One of the things that astounds me with the auto industry, and we're kind of a little off topic, but not a lot,
No,
is
roots.
how fast people adapted to the automobile. For example, 1893, the Duryea brothers in Springfield, Massachusetts became the first manufacturer of automobiles in the United States. What do you do with these damn things? You know, what are they? Barnum Bailey Circus had the answer. They gave a Duryea motor wagon top billing over the albino, the fat lady, and the dog-faced boy. It was a sideshow curiosity. Montgomery Ward said, take your children to see it before the fad passes. And yet, just 5 years later, we had the first automobile race in the United States. 1903, we had Dr. Jackson. I think drinking was involved because he did this on a $50 bet. He became the first person to drive across the United States. 1903. 1905, we had cars setting speed records of 150 miles an hour.
Amazing. Amazing. And so motels come in, and that's where I think people also think about Route 66 is the roadside motel. You're parked outside. Now, I know on the Jefferson Highway, we have tourist camps where people car camped, basically. Did that happen on Route 66 before the motels or no?
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of the early motels started out as auto camps, and a lot of communities, to capitalize on tourism, they started offering and establishing a free campgrounds with showers, with different amenities, getting people to camp in their towns. And that gave rise, the motels started coming up in the teens, but we started out with, a lot of it was campgrounds, and then we got into auto courts, then motels and the chain motels. The other thing this book, what we did was not just the prehistory, we opened it with that, but we chronicled the evolution of Route 66 from highway to icon, to its international fascination, to its modern era with an EV museum and EV charging stations, and the international fascination. And the other thing that made the book really special for me, I was able to work with some very, very talented friends that are very passionate about the history, the American story that's encapsulated on Route 66. Cheryl Eicher Jett from Illinois, an organizer of the Miles of Possibility Conference and an author. Joe Sonderman, a prolific postcard collector who's with the Missouri Route 66 Association. Of course, Reese Martin with the Oklahoma Association. Greg Hassman, a journalist out of Albuquerque that is extremely passionate about road history and culture. And for an international flavor, we got my friend Dries Bessels of the Dutch Route 66 Association to write a chapter on the international fascination with Route 66.
I love it because I love that history of the actual, how did all of this come to be? Because there's so many factors. And I think you just go on, it's like, oh, this route was here, and then it went away for a while, and now it came back again. How did that all happen for folks to understand? Because we had wars in between all of this that kind of changed the landscape. And actually, before you get there, we had highways like the Lincoln Highway, the Pikes Peak, the National Trails, and Jefferson Highway. We got rid of names, and suddenly we have numbers like Route 66. Who decided that?
Well, it started actually in Wisconsin. We started out with all these different named trails, like Jefferson Highway, all these. Everybody had their own thing. A lot of times it was look for the red and white marking on the telephone poles. And guidebooks, turn left at the bridge that used to be painted yellow.
It's fun, though. It's a treasure hunt. That's what this is all about.
Wisconsin, about 1918, Wisconsin had one of the first real highway departments. And they said, we've got to bring order to this. So they started issuing numbers for different highways in the state. That became the foundation for the U.S. highway system's numbering system. And then they had a commission, Cyrus Avery, who had been involved with the Ozark Trails highway system, Pikes Peak, Albert Pike Highway, and a few others. And he was quite a pioneer in many, many ways. He established one of the first gasoline taxes to fund and create a highway department in Oklahoma. And he was on the national committee to create a U.S. highway system. And they came up with a numbering system that would be east and west highways would be even numbered, and north and south highways would be odd numbered.
Oh.
But we get into, of course, politics play a big role in this. Originally, Route 66, which kind of was an oddity because it kind of went north and south as well as east and west. It was given the number US 60, and a lot of states put out maps. They started producing highway signs, US 60. And there was a political uproar with the governor of Kentucky. We had to have all the states sign off on this for this to work. The governor of Kentucky threw a wrench in the works, and he wanted Highway 60, for whatever reason, to run through his state. So it led to a bit of a political stalemate and a quagmire. There was a series of meetings in Springfield, Missouri,
Mm.
and this is why they claimed to be the birthplace of Route 66.
Yeah.
They met in John Woodward's office there in Springfield, and they reached a compromise that the 60 would go through Kentucky, and we would assign 66 to the highway from Chicago to Los Angeles. And some of the states were outraged because we're already putting up Highway 60 signs. We've already got maps printed, and now we're changing everything to 66. But
Wow.
that's how Route 66 came about.
I wonder who decided Highway 666 is okay, because there is that Highway 666 we've been on, and that's kind of a freaky vibe going on there.
It's Highway 191 now. They've changed most of it. There's still a section of 666, but it's been largely changed here in Arizona. Highway 191 from Morenci up through Hannigan's Meadows, Springerville. That's one of the great drives,
Isn't it? Well, this is the other thing too, is like when people do Route 66, people want to stay on the route, see what was the original part, and the actual road itself. I remember there's parts that you can still find certain parts where the actual asphalt is still there, but it's changed over the years. I mean, this highway Route 66 has been used for multiple things, including military operations. Since this is going on in November, let's talk a little military history on the highway. Is massive.
Well, we can go back to this. There's a couple components here. When people ask me and they start trying to pin me down about Route 66, how long is it? Well, which Route 66? The picture you have in the background is in the Black Mountains of Arizona. That's the pre-1952 alignment of Route 66. That road was put in 1921 as part of the National Old Trails Road to replace the original National Old Trails Road that had 26% grades. But Route 66, there it is, 1952. In New Mexico, before 1937, Route 66 made a big loop from Santa Rosa and up through Santa Fe and down to Albuquerque. Well, Route 66 changed, and you mentioned earlier, the Route 66 of 1930 was not the Route 66 of 1960. The Route 66 of 1960 was a blending of everything from 1930 to 1960 with a little bit before. The military aspect of all of this really is kind of long. We can start with the replacement for Route 66, the interstate highway. Dwight Eisenhower's great situation. A lot of people say that it was the Autobahn in Germany that kind of pushed him and inspired this. Well, that was part of it. But in 1919, Lieutenant Eisenhower was part of a military convoy from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco along the Lincoln Highway. There's a great book called The American Road. And it was a test of viability of vehicles for military, trucks, motorcycles, cars from all these hundreds of different companies. Plus, it was a showcase that we need better roads for national defense. That helped fuel the U.S. highway system development. Military on Route 66 is a whole nother chapter, and this is another reason why Route 66 is so fascinating, because it, like I mentioned earlier, it really encapsulates the entire American story, even predating the founding of the United States.
Yeah, and next year is 250, America 250.
And what better place to celebrate that than on the main street of America?
Well, there you go. And we should talk about the Main Street concept too. But anyway, go back to military. We've got 20,000 rabbit holes going on down this highway.
The military aspect is really quite intriguing, and you'll find tangible links To the best of my knowledge, for example, the only official German and Italian military cemetery in the United States is in Oklahoma on Route 66. At Fort Reno, Oklahoma, outside of El Reno, that's an old military outpost dating back to right after the Civil War. You have a cavalry museum there, but you have a cemetery with buffalo soldiers, segregated cemetery. You have buffalo soldiers, pioneers. This was a military outpost up until about 1951, 52. But during World War II, it was a German POW camp, and there was Italian POWs. So you have an official cemetery for people who died that were German and Italian soldiers. And it changed the road. In Missouri, there's a beautiful section of Route 66, Hooker's Devil's Elbow, crosses the Big Piney River on the 1923 bridge. And even back in the 30s, it was listed as one of the top scenic places in the state of Missouri. Still is, but it was narrow. The bridge was narrow. The road was narrow. And they started constructing Fort Leonard Wood at the beginning of World War II. We had to fix this. So they built Hooker's Cut to bypass that. And at the time, again, useless trivia, that was the deepest highway cut in the United States. And it became the first 4-lane segment of Route 66 in Missouri. And at the time of the bypass with the I-44 construction, it became the last 4-lane section of Route 66 in Missouri. But the military transformed Route 66 in so many different ways. Up in Illinois, the Midland Prairie National Preserve outside of Chicago, going south towards Elwood, Illinois. There's a place of prairie. They've brought buffalo back and done all this prairie. That during the war along Route 66 was an armament, a series of ammunition factories and armaments. And one of the largest peacetime explosions in United States history decimated Route 66 and everything around that area. And that became that Midland reclaiming area. So the military connection, and well, all along the road, you have POW camps, military installations. Kingman, I had the Kingman Army Airfield.
That's right.
Still here. There's a lot of remnants. One of the last World War II era control towers is here in Kingman. That became one of the largest flexible gunnery schools in the United States. And it was established because of the location and Route 66 and the railroad. That's why those bases were established.
It's amazing because when you look at the highway, you can have all these different experiences according to what your interest is and hopefully gain some other interests. And I think what's great about this kind of travel is you go with, hey, there's this historic highway and now it's cool. You know, when it first started, it's like, oh, this is cool. It's new. Now it's, hey, you know, it's a resurgence of it. It's really been going well and people are preserving the history. You can still have that old feeling. You can go stay in old motels. In the book, you've got some of our friends' Boots Court Motel and you've got I got to give shout out to the Highway Cafe in Veneta, Oklahoma, who's got the Western Motel as well. And now, have you been to Gearhead Curios?
Yeah.
Did you hit the head?
Yeah, I was just there last year. I was coming back from the Miles of Possibility conference.
That's so cool. I mean, I love when all these highways crisscross each other as well, but the experiences are so different. Just like when you're talking about this prairie reserve, and then you go somewhere like Barstow, and you could go to the ghost town, Yerma ghost town, and you've got like in the beginning of the book, you talk about all these ghost towns on the highway. And that to me is part of the importance of these highways is that these ghost towns could also, if no one, who's going to go on these other older byways, right? If someone didn't showcase them as something to go and do, because it's human history being forgotten a lot of times, you know?
There's so much, whatever your interest is. And we see this in pockets on other roads, but I don't know of any other highway besides Route 66 that has this depth of history and the future. The world's first EV museum is being established on Route 66. We have that going on. And yet in New Mexico, just a couple miles off Route 66, you have Acoma. That is the oldest continuously inhabited community in the United States. Over 1,000 years, people have been living there.
It's amazing.
I mentioned the Beale Road here in Arizona, and of course the Mojave Road across the Mojave Desert. But the Beale Road, that was the first federally funded road, but it was laid over a Native American trade route that had been used for well over 1,000 years, connecting the Zuni Pueblos, the Hopi villages, with the tribes where Los Angeles is now. So you've just got this incredible layers and layers of
The
history.
other you've got rail history that is also connected, and it's almost like they work hand in hand. Without rail, you don't get the supplies as well. So there's this interesting tie to the rail history that it touches on as well, I think, you know.
Well, transportation in general, and I'll use Kingman as an example. We had the trade route through here. We have a turquoise mine that's been worked for over 1,000 years. That was part of the trade route. But you had then the Beal Wagon Road, then the Atlantic and Pacific established the railroad through here. Kingman was established as a railroad construction camp. There's an interesting story behind that where a fellow sold property he didn't own, but hey, what the hell? It's all profit if you don't own it. But we got into then the National Old Trails Road, but it doesn't stop with just the classic road race, the Desert Classic with Louis Chevrolet. Then we get into the aviation history that's tied with this. TAT Airlines, Transcontinental Air Transport, was the first coast-to-coast passenger air service. Charles Lindbergh was involved with that. And what they did was establish these airfields. You would fly during the day, and then you could overnight and take the plane the next day, or you would fly into a community and take the train at night and then fly the next day. And it cut the time across the country dramatically. But they were looking for places that had a highway connection and railroad connection to establish these ports, these terminals. One was Kingman, because we had Route 66 and the railroad. So you had Amelia Earhart here for the ribbon cutting.
That's right.
And then the Kingman Army Airfield was established because we had the airfield. We had airfield from TAT was still here. They built a new airfield, and we had the railroads. They could bring troops and supplies in. We also had the highway US 66 is a direct connection to the West Coast, and that's why the Kingman Army Airfield was established here.
Amazing, isn't it, when you think about how everything connects? Now, you've got these really fun things on the highway too, to do and on and off. Now, do you go beyond, Route 66 itself to go and explore a few hours off? Hey, there's something near there, because I look at it as like a 3-hour radius of wherever you are on like Route 66. So I always think, hey, if there's something over there you've always wanted to see, go do it. So I think it's like a big corridor to me, bigger than the highway itself.
I'm not myopic. I'm a passionate fan of road trips. I'm up in Nebraska, I'm in
Yeah.
Wyoming, Montana, whatever, but 66 is kind of the cornerstone. And I gave a presentation at the Miles of Possibility conference about my 66 years of association with Route 66.
Cool.
But that's that's a topic for therapy, not for here. But you mentioned
I just feel like you need to have some cake now. So to give you
apple
cake.
pie, apple
Oh,
pie.
okay.
Yes.
That's a whole other thing, is food on the highway.
How you
Boy.
get in this kind of shape because you love apple pie. But even back when in the highway's heyday, the U.S. Highway 66 Association was not myopic. They realized the key to tourism on this road was promoting things you could see, like the Grand Canyon. That's a short detour off Route 66, Sedona. But you don't have to even figure 3 hours. If you put 25 miles of Route 66, 50 at the most, Paladuro Canyon out of Amarillo, Wallapai Mountain Park here in Kingman.
Oh, yeah, I've been there.
12 miles off Route 66, lodge, hiking trails, pine forested island in the
Camping.
sea of desert.
Yeah.
The only road that you can drive to the bottom of the Grand Canyon is from Peach Springs on Route 66. There's a dirt road that goes 30 miles to the bottom, to the Colorado River at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. You throw in these little detours.
See, the detours are the cool thing, and it makes you keep coming back. It's like it's a never-ending adventure. And I think it gets kids, okay, we got GPS, which is cool, with Google Maps and all of that, but I like an old map. But I think for getting kids to maybe put the phone down from the game kind of thing, there's Route 66 games and stuff out there, I know, but to get out there and start to understand how to read a map, not just because GPS, it's a great convenience, and it's great to follow a route that you may have made that you want to go and do. If you're following the Route 66, now make sure I go here and there. So it's a great convenience, but we lose perspective, I think, from GPS of what we're doing, where it is. Like if you just put Route 66 on GPS, you don't quite get the breadth of what it is. Actually doing a road trip with kids is number one, like one, a family gets together and actually has time together, has an adventure. Oh boy, we have a flat tire. How are we going to problem solve this as a family? And roughing it a little bit too, don't you think? So I really am for it for families to do. And from what I'm seeing, the travel for that is actually going up. Road tripping is increasing every few, like by, I think it was between 6 and 10% a week. I mean, a year.
We need to get a younger generation involved. And you see it a little bit with Brady Wilson in Texas, Reese Martin and his wife Sam. There's a younger generation, and you see it in young business owners on Route 66 doing this. But I just had folks, Chris and Ashley Riley, on my podcast last week. They have Super Tam on Route 66 in Carterville, Missouri. It's an old-fashioned 1950s ice cream parlor with what was supposed to be one of the world's largest collection of Superman memorabilia.
I'm in.
Uranus Fudge Company in General.
I was going to bring that up. We went there this year. I am in. It's yep.
There's ways we can do this and get kids involved. A couple people have taken a page from the Automobile Driving Museum in El Segundo. The genesis of that museum was, why do not young people have interest in vintage cars? Every time you see one, what does it say? Do not touch. Mm-hmm. So the Automobile Driving Museum takes you for a ride, literally.
Oh, it might be cool.
It might be a 1905 Cadillac. It might be a DeLorean or a Pacer, but they take you for a ride. Now on Route 66, we've got some auto museums that'll take you for a ride down Route 66 in a 1926 Cadillac. Driving schools. We've got these things coming up that are getting young people to experience, to touch. The days of stagnant museum, because of video games and things of this nature, the old-fashioned flat museums are fading. You need that interaction, that tangible, that touch, taste, smell. And there's a lot of experiences out there that we can do that and get young people. And Route 66 is at the forefront of that. You're finding it all along the road. There's a Pooseum that opened in Williams. Petrified, fossilized, dinosaur poo. It's a whole new...
They need to open next to Uranus Fudge Factory. Come on.
Everything that goes with that. But those are the kind of things that you get a kid's attention. You get their interest.
And us. But that's the fun thing. We need to laugh, and I think everyone needs a good road trip. But I also think, so much of... Look at everyone wanting to take their photos, their selfies. They want the big landmarks. They want the big blue whale. They want, all these giants and all the memorabilia that's out there for them to take photos in. And that's the other thing, rest areas. Okay, I've got a thing about rest areas. And I know a gentleman wrote a book maybe 10 years ago, trying to, because we're losing some of the iconic ones. Texas has some interesting rest area, picnic areas that you're sitting under an oil derrick. It's pretty cool. Route 66, I think it's Springfield in Missouri, that has it's a rest area on Route 66 where you sit in your little ramadas are little roadside gas station things, and they have little gas stations on them, and it's fun. And so it's really themed Route 66. I want to see more rest areas kind of have that memorabilia, that not memorabilia, but Americana feel. I think outside Winslow, some rest areas that have that old school vibe to them. A lot of them have history attached to it too.
Well, roadside parks were a big part of, and I when I did this presentation, if you're curious about that, you can find it on our YouTube channel. It was my 66-year connection. My folks used to tease me in inopportune times that I was potty trained along Route 66, but I literally learned to ride a bicycle on that road behind you. I learned to drive trucks on that road. We moved out there in the summer of 66 on the old...
Wow.
We built a house out there. And my first job was for Ed at Ed's camp below...
No way, by Oatman, yeah.
That was my first job, was working for Ed Edgerton up at Ed's camp. So, yeah, I've had this Route 66 thing going for all my life. You wanted to mention Oatman since we're looking at that picture. Now, Oatman's a lot of fun. It's a caricature of what you expect the Old West to be. The boroughs have free... Have you ever met the mayor in Oatman?
No.
Walter is the most honest politician I have ever met. He's an ass, and he doesn't claim to be anything else. Walter is
that's
a
funny.
donkey. And he's the unofficial mayor. He comes through town wearing a top hat. He has a line of children's books that he'll autograph by walking through ink on the books. But I mean, that's the kind of quirky.
That's the stuff you want to have that fun and put the history in context so that and the visuals with visuals, because you know how we are. We're all needing extra visuals these days. Everyone, Route 66, 100 years, a Route 66 Centennial anthology. Get it because it has that history. It has old maps and it has all the, going back to like what postcards and things like that were. Just those old things that we don't have anymore, all the way till to now, looking at it.
And we didn't shy away from any of the other topics either, because we don't want to be, we agreed when we did this book, we wanted the entire history. And that means not just focusing on neon and tail fins. So
Yeah.
we got into the green book for the Negro motorist. We got into segregation, the properties, problems with Native Americans, exploitation. We got into the stories of immigrants, the incredible stories of immigrants linked to
Amazing,
Route
huh?
66. Yeah, we tried to tell the whole story.
Well, that's the story of America, like you said. In closing, America's Main Street, right? So did this help spur the actual like Main Street now as we think of it, do you think?
This is another story. Actually, that came up with a Judge Lowe and at the convention for the National Old Trails Road Association about 1913. They were trying to find a way to differentiate the National Old Trails Road from the Jefferson Highway, Lincoln Highway, all these others. They hatched up a marketing campaign billing the National Old Trails Road as the Main Street of America.
It's amazing.
And when the president of the National Old Trails Road Association in the 1920s was Harry Truman, and he got a little offended because Cyrus Avery grabbed that 1927, and they started billing Route 66 as the Main Street of America.
It's funny how roads get all these different names. They do. They get somebody comes up, hey, let's do this. It's the Mother Road, but it's like the Main Street of America. It's like all these different titles that come up for it to name it. But I think now, when we look at America's 250th birthday, why not look at Route 66 as its centennial too? And that's a really good way to explore. And I think your book is a collector's item. I mean, all of us who are into road tripping, these are just gems to have, so
Thank you.
well, thanks again. It's so good to see you and have you back on the show. What's next for you?
I've got a few things in the works. I'm working, I've got a proposal out on the incestuous relationship of the early auto industry. Henry Ford's role in the formation of Cadillac, the Ransom E. Olds as his involvement, the David Buick, Walter Chrysler, Louis Chevrolet, the early automotive industry. Got some road trips planned. Pushing the podcast, I finally reached a milestone a couple months ago, 300,000 people in 1 month.
Awesome.
On that, and
Yeah.
that's never been a Jim show. Jim Hinckley's America was founded. I was told that I could tell stories for hours, even if I was the only one in the room, and enjoy myself. That was one part of it, and the other part was people said I had a gift for telling people where to go.
Yeah.
And
Oh, there you go.
So I put the two together with my wife's encouragement, and that's the result. But I'm going to be building that, sharing America's story, and telling people where to go.
That's fantastic.
That's what I like doing.
Now, where are you going to go for a good piece of apple pie on Route 66?
You mentioned Beth Hilburn's place, the Highway Cafe.
Yeah.
It's good. Cobbler, right down the street from her place is Vanita, is Clanton's Cafe.
Okay.
They're one family owned, been there since the 90s. They make tremendous cobbler. So you got to pace yourself because it's only about 3 miles from the Highway
Oh,
Cafe.
dear.
So you
Might
have a
have to
small
start
pie and a small. That's an idea. But yeah,
Yeah.
there's some great places for desserts and pies out there, and ice cream parlors. There's some tremendous ice cream parlors out there.
Isn't that? Yeah, we miss those. Like really good ice cream,
I got a couple of them. We got a new one that just opened in Kingman. It's gourmet, all natural ice cream, Scoops on 66. And it's in an old 1930s Route 66 diner that has been closed for about 45 years. It's right
Oh
on
my
Route
gosh.
66.
Wow. And that visitor center is still big and going because I remember that visitor center being huge.
Yeah, the visitor center's still there. We're working with the Historic Electric Vehicle Museum. get the, there'll be a rotating exhibit. It's already in the powerhouse of electric vehicles, but we're going to have a dedicated EV museum here in Kingman. It should be open by next year. We've had an entire block that scoops on 66. We got a dynamic couple that moved in, Tim Webb and Lenore Knudsen, and they took an entire block between 2nd and 3rd Street. They started with a 1939 gas station on the corner. They renovated it. They went as far as Pennsylvania to get an original Pegasus to put up on it. The quirkiest, oddest gas pump I've ever seen from 1919 they've put out front. That's now a bicycle museum and bicycle rental store. Next door, we have the nice cafe that is now Scoops on 66. Then there was a whole bunch of terribly bad buildings. They bulldozed all of that. And they brought in vintage Airstream trailers. They were old. They gutted them, made them into modern Airbnbs, and they set up Tin Can Alley on 66. And then next to that, they took an old nice roadhouse and converted it to mud on 66, a gourmet coffee shop.
Wow. That's fantastic. But that's what I think, people are having, we saw this during COVID as we were on the road. We worked with a lot of bed and breakfast, and we were noticing that it was like a different generation coming in. It's like the 2nd or 3rd chapter of their life that they, like what you were saying, is happening on Route 66, that want to keep the history, make it more fun. Like when you go in a bed and breakfast, things were a little bit more livelier. Let's put it that way. They didn't have tons of doilies and dust catchers and things like, it just is a different experience. And I think that's what's needed for it. So that's fantastic. Good for Kingman.
This is a thought to leave you with, but I really think that what's driving this Route 66 renaissance, this passion for Route 66, we mentioned the people. It goes a little deeper. We live in a very, very cold and impersonal world. We have 500 friends on Facebook, 400 of them we've never met, and 50 of them, when you meet them, you go, why? But when it's cold, it's impersonal. You get on Route 66, it's personal. You're having pie at Beth Hilburn's, and you hear a guy talking about someplace in Iowa, and you mention, I've been there. Next thing you know, you're talking to him, and then you're talking about Route 66. I sat in a tavern one night. I was speaking in the Netherlands, and I went down to Belgium, a real rainy January evening, and I was with Dries Bessels, a friend of ours from the Dutch Association, and we were talking about Route 66, and a gentleman that was in the pub came over and asked us about the Midpoint Cafe, if they were still making apple pie, ugly crust pie in Adrian. And next thing you know, we had another fellow asking us about Angel. Before we get this thing done, we've got a half a dozen people in Belgium on a rainy January night talking about Route 66. We'd never met each other. We got language, cultural barriers. One thing brought us all together, Route 66.
Love that. That's a perfect way to close this conversation. And listen, go for a road trip with your buddies and your family. You can do it solo, but, go get the van, go get the trailer, go rent an Airstream, do whatever it is. But have a good time and take your selfies with all the crazy things. Put them up there for people to see so more people go do it. But Jim, a real pleasure. Thank you. And best wishes on the next projects. Keep us posted.
I will, Lisa.
Travel safe.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Big Blend's Road Trip Radio Show. Keep up with us at bigblendradio.com. And for travel articles, road trip articles, go to blendradioandtv.com and nationalparktraveling.com. Happy travels!